The penultimate episode of Samurai Jack continues on from the kissing scene of the previous episode, with Jack and Ashi acting flustered and dorky about their newfound affection for one another. While I was hesitant about the two splitting up, I mean there could be another convict hiding aboard the crashed space prison somewhere, nothing dangerous occurred from the two scouting the area separately, other than Jack's naked form getting peeped on, of course. Jack's inner self, the old worn-down survivor persona he used to have, doesn't haunt him, but rather gives him a word of warning.
Be careful.
Jack has never fallen in love before, and it can lead to new danger and even greater loss, and this realization stirs up some apprehensiveness in Jack. Ashi asks about Jack's past while they munch on a painfully chewy meal, and he reminisces about the life of leisure he used to have as an 8-year-old child. I don't know how and where Ashi picked up on indirect language so quickly.
Was there a girl?
And that actually caught me a bit off guard. She went from somebody unsure why deer would nuzzle each other to somebody more aware of such things than a 70 or 80-year-old man. I guess that just goes to show how romantic feelings really never did cross Jack's mind a single time during his whole life leading up to this point. Jack has come to terms with the realization that he won't ever be able to go back to the past.
It is the only way I will ever see it again. As a memory.
Although clearly the thought still pains him. In a stereotypically cheesy move, he abandons Ashi in the night because he's afraid tragedy will befall her if she sticks with him. Although yeah, in the end, I guess his hunch was correct. While I don't have any specific issues with the first portion of the episode, such lukewarm moments of bonding feel like events that should have occurred earlier in the season, and not when we're already in the penultimate episode and quickly approaching the finale. I couldn't help but just want things to move along already. Their newfound romance is clearly meant to up the stakes and make things even more of a potential tragedy, but trying to flesh it out further this late into the game just made me feel impatient rather than appreciate what I was watching. Scaramouche unintentionally giving Aku misinformation was minutes of this episode that I thought could have been skipped altogether. The scene wasn't particularly amusing and just felt like time wasted more than anything else. Plus, if Aku just showed up with no warning, it would have made for a far bigger impact, and then we could have easily inferred that Scaramouche relayed the information and got his body back as he was with Aku at the time. I honestly wish they had just scrapped this scene altogether and allotted the precious time to practically anything else. My interest was piqued, however, when Jack ventured to the portal that the Guardian watched over in the past. Aku wasn't kidding when he said he destroyed every single time portal, because yup, this one is also no more, and the Guardian himself bit the dust as well, showcased by his broken glasses in the sand. Really, we should have assumed the time portal was gone already, but I thought it was nice to get confirmation in this subtle manner, although this scene would certainly leave anybody who hasn't watched the original series pretty confused. When Jack and Ashi reunite and are at their most hopeful, Aku shows up and does his usual taunting, and I have to ask, why did Jack not use the element of surprise to try and cut Aku down here and now? It's the perfect moment! Sure, I can understand not jumping at the opportunity in the original series, maybe, but after all the pain and anguish Jack has suffered through for 50 years, you'd think he'd be more no-nonsense when finally face-to-face with Aku with his sword in hand. But no, Jacko just draws the swordo with a glare to let Aku know he has it. Why, Jack? You big dumb idiot! Then Scaramouche dies because his plot purpose has been fulfilled. He brought Jack and Aku together, not to accidentally provide Jack with a surprise attack like I thought was going to happen, but rather his actions allowed Aku to take control of Ashi. Turns out this wasn't merely a random deranged cult. Aku actually visited them, and birth was given to literal daughters of Aku after all. He had given them some of his essence, and drinking said essence will apparently somehow impregnate you, and yep, one night stand Aku. I now want to know even more why the cult chose to indoctrinate the daughters of Aku with lies about Aku's true nature. Wouldn't it have been more effective to raise them up being evil? Sadly, since there's only one episode left, I don't think I'm going to get the exploration of the machinations behind this cult that I so desperately crave. But the action from this point on was on point. It was really freaking sweet all the way to the end of the episode. Jack tries to help Ashi mentally overcome Aku's control.
Ashi, you are not your father. You are not your mother. You are your own person. You are good. You can defeat him from inside.
And I gotta agree with Aku here.
Boring!
Had the conflict been resolved with Ashi simply overcoming the control Aku exerts over her, that would have been a rather boring resolution. Instead, Ashi gets a badass transformation and becomes so cool. The combat was completely captivating to watch, and the moves Ashi was able to pull off in Aku mode were downright awesome. The fight choreography was really something special. Ashi manages one final plea after being sliced by Jack's sword for him to end her life and slay Aku, but Jack is shaken and unable to continue. He drops his sword and renounces his purpose. I gotta be honest, I do think the scenario had a small amount of cheese to it, and the music choice during the emotional moment wasn't doing it for me, but nevertheless, it was fairly compelling. I do think jamming the characters into a romantic entanglement for the purpose of making this development be more tragic is a bit cheap, and you can clearly see how the script was stitched together to achieve this purpose, which did dampen my ability to feel emotional about this scene. The feeling that Ashi is a plot device was stronger for me than the feeling of how sad this scenario could potentially be, so I remained somewhat detached. But that ending art, Aku relishing that he has finally gained possession of the sword that has haunted him for so long, it was just such a good ending shot. I loved it. Oh my glob, it was glorious. I'm very curious for what happens next. How will things resolve? The Scotsman has to come back next episode. There's absolutely no way they would just abandon his plotline. If Ashi is part of Aku, if she does regain some control, could she actually be the one to open a time portal for Jack? Perhaps we'll even have another time skip, and the vision the Guardian saw will actually come true for the finale? Who knows, there's so many possibilities, and that gets me really excited. Overall, I have fairly mixed feelings on this episode. The fight was cool and the ending scene was amazing, but a lot of the other portions of the episode didn't really resonate with me. I also wish the background design was a bit more interesting. Visually, I would say this might be the weakest episode of the bunch, which is a shame as it had one of my favorite fight scenes in the revival. A few background designs were sweet, but for the most part, this desert remained rather bland. But hey, this is not the finale, it's events leading up to the finale, so I really hope the conclusion can just blow us all away.